Hi there, this is the Athletic FC podcast weekend preview, and it is match day 36. I'm Adam Leventhal, and with me to preview the weekend's action is Tim Spiers. How are you, Tim?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm ready for a big weekend. It is a bank holiday weekend, of course. Alongside Tim, we have Andy Jones. How are you, Andy?
I'm very good, thank you.
And Jordan Campbell is here as well. How are you, Jordan?
I'm very well as well, Adam.
Very good. Very good. You see? There you go, Tim. Just lessons learned from a couple of youngsters. Brilliant. Okay, let's get straight into the fixture formation. Tim's favourite part of the week. It is a busy bank holiday weekend, as I said. It's a 1-5-3-1 proper formation. That, isn't it? We start on Friday night, and it is a big game at the bottom for Luton Town. Are they going to get a win against Everton? The early kickoff on Saturday sees Arsenal go up against Bournemouth at the Emirates. Then we have 3 p.m.s on Saturday. Brentford against Fulham, Burnley against Newcastle, and Sheffield United against Nottingham Forest. Then at 5:30, we're back on the title race with Manchester City having an opportunity to again respond to Arsenal's results. They host Wolves. And then on to Sunday, we've got 2 p.m.s. Once again, Brighton against Villa, Chelsea against West Ham, followed by Tottenham heading to Anfield as they face Liverpool in Jurgen Klopp's penultimate home game. And then on Monday, finally, we're at Selhurst Park for Crystal Palace hosting Manchester United. But we are going to start with the title race. Okay, let's start with the top two, separated only by a point at the moment. And first up is Arsenal against Bournemouth. Last season, you'll remember, it did sort of encapsulate Arsenal's emotional and chaotic, frantic end to the campaign. They did, in this one, come from 2-0 down, and they won 3-2 thanks to that 97th minute winner from Reiss Nelson. Jordan, I wanted to come to you on this. Obviously, you're covering Arsenal closely. Does their current form and the way that they're operating, and maybe a nod to, maybe a similar sort of precarious position against Tottenham last week and the way that they handled it, does it show that they've matured, that they're able to stay the distance this time?
Yeah, I think they're a completely different team, temperament-wise, to what they were last season. We talk about that Bournemouth comeback last year. That felt like the moment where it felt real for Arsenal that this was destined to be their year. But if we think about it, that was still 12 or 13 games out. And I think what they've realised this time is that is still a long way to go in a title race. Gary Neville, I think it was, saying last year that nothing counts until April and May. And a lot of people were sort of disregarding that as sort of just being something an ex-footballer would say. But I think you've realised this season that it's actually very true. But I think Arsenal have handled it really well. They flipped it from last season where they started off like a house on fire and then sort of gradually faded away. And this year they've built up. And now they're up, 13 wins from the last 15. They're at that sort of Man City level of sequence where they can just reel off games. And I mean, maybe I'm tempting fate here, but last 3 games, I pretty much fancy Arsenal to take full points. And you've got to just hope, from an Arsenal point of view, that Man City have got a draw in them somewhere. But yeah, I think temperament-wise, they're just not. They don't look ragged. They don't look rushed. And again, that they're finding that knack of killing games early on. So with Spurs, you can have a little dip for half an hour, but it still felt pretty comfortable. Maybe not the last few minutes, but it didn't feel like they were getting absolutely, having to deal with cross after cross and were really on the ropes. So no, I think people worried after that Aston Villa game. Is that going to disrupt them? Are they going to mentally fade? The week they went out against Bayern Munich as well. But I think you look at the core of that team now, and you've got Rice, you've got Odegaard. Looks like he's really, really stepped up in terms of leadership as well. And I don't think you can overestimate having Saliba the full season. People seem to forget that's what happened last season, and everything went to pot as soon as he left. So I think having that spine of the team and having those 7-8 players that Arteta relies on, people try and talk about the lack of rotation as a bad thing, but to me, like, if you've not got a Man City squad, which no one else does, then you've got to have a 7, 8 players who you can rely on every single week. So, I think that because of that, Arsenal they look like they're in sort of autopilot. They know exactly what they're doing, and I think they look really, really calm.
Andy, I wanted to ask you because we've obviously been focused on Arsenal, but Bournemouth themselves are in wonderful form, and it sounds like a cliche, but they certainly shouldn't be underestimated in this one. This is not a given for Arsenal in any way, shape, or form, is it?
No, definitely not. I think we've seen all the way through the season. Well, since Bournemouth beat Burnley, really, which sort of kick-started their season back in October, where we've sort of seen, the ideas that Iraola has and the idea behind appointing him in the first place sort of shine through. And I think you've seen, obviously Solanke being a spearhead in it, but you've seen the sort of the attack and play and what they want to do with the ball more and more. Although for some reason Burnley had 75% against the possession against them, which still baffles me brain. But other than that, I think you've seen that they can take it to pretty much anyone. And at least lay a glove on the opposition and cause them problems. You've got Semenyo, who's I think's been excellent for large portions of the season as well. So it's certainly not going to be a walk in the park, and Bournemouth with a counter attacking threat. Any side who's got sort of that ability to have pace on the break, and a reliable goal scorer at the top of the pitch is always going to cause you problems at some point in the game. But it's just whether as a top team, whether you've taken it away from them already, or you're in a position to deal with those situations better than other teams would.
Okay, let's get some score predictions, but just a quick reminder of the form of Bournemouth. They are only third behind Manchester City and Arsenal over the last 10 games. They've picked up 20 points. Man City with 26, Arsenal with 25. So Arsenal are trying to take on one of the form teams in the Premier League. Jordan, let's get your score prediction for this one.
I'm going to go 2-0 to Arsenal.
2-0. Tim?
I think I can see Bournemouth taking the lead. They've taken the lead in the majority of their matches this season.
Didn't they take a really, really early lead against Arsenal last time?
Yeah, it was straight from the kickoff, wasn't it?
It was, wasn't it? Yeah. That is really early, yeah.
Yeah. So I think they will score first, but Arsenal will win 3-1.
Okay. And Andy?
Yeah, I was going to go comfortable 3-1 for Arsenal.
Oh. I would say uncomfortable 3-1, just to be different.
Yeah, fine. Okay, that's good. That's a good caveat to have. Right, let's deal with the other part of this title race. Manchester City, they weren't totally convincing against Nottingham Forest, but they got the job done, and they've got Erling Haaland back and looks just a bit happier than he has been. How do you see them approaching these final few games, Tim? Do you just see them sort of going from strength to strength, or is there any sort of glimmer of hope for Arsenal?
No, as I said last week, I do think they'll drop points. It's just a matter of where, really. Spurs is the one, but Spurs are now in their worst moment of the season, right? Charlie Eccleshare last night was saying it's their lowest point of the whole season. It's not good news for Arsenal, really. I'm not sure I can quite see Wolves getting something here, but yeah, I don't know. City are more fallible than they were last year, for sure. The Haaland return's an interesting one. I mean, I watched them give probably their most complete performance in the last few weeks against Brighton, sort of about a week ago now. You know when you bring Haaland in, he's basically a spare part in terms of build-up play. He's pretty much just a body. But then he's still the 6th top scorer in Europe this season. So anyone who sort of says he's not going to bring anything to the team is just being ridiculous, really. But if Guardiola stays next season and he's sort of got the same front line, that's a really interesting dilemma, I think, for him going forward. Does he persist with Haaland at his core? Is he bothered by the fact he doesn't touch the ball in the build-up? Is he bothered by the fact that his link-up play doesn't seem to be massively improving? Because it's not very Guardiola-esque to sort of persist with that. But yeah, the goals speak for themselves, really. City will create a lot of chances against Wolves this weekend, and In the reverse fixture, Craig Dawson was sort of Wolves' hero that day and kept Haaland quiet. He's out this time. He's out for the rest of the season. So his Haaland's nemesis, as he's known, Dawson, will not be there. So yeah, it's I can see City breezing through this one, but the Spurs game is obviously on the horizon.
Okay, because obviously, they won against City. Gary Neville got the better of Pep. So you're simply down to the fact that Craig Dawson isn't playing. That's why this double over City isn't going to happen.
So people will look to the fact that Wolves beat them, before Christmas. But that was like a freakish game. Wolves had one shot on target that day and won 2-1. City had 28 shots. Craig Dawson was in inspired form, as was Pedro Neto, who was sort of in his cheat mode that day. He's not around. He might make a return to the bench after 2 months away, but he's not fit either, really. So, Wolves will sit very deep. They'll try and deny them space. They'll try and hit them on the counter-attack through Cunha, who, to be fair, is a special player and doing special things this season. But it'll need to be complete perfection at both ends of the pitch. It's a sort of 1 in 10, 1 in 15 chance. I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's very unlikely.
I just wanted to get Jordan's opinion on this. And it was interesting what you said there, Tim, about Erling Haaland, because you were sort of effusive in your praise, but there was, reading between the lines, maybe a suggestion that they don't function, obviously, as well with Erling Haaland in the side. It would be interesting that perhaps Erling Haaland coming back is going to disrupt them more than actually help them in these final few games, Jordan. Do you think that has any credence?
I'd be inclined to say no, because I think in these final few games, we all know that Man City are going to dominate the ball. They are, even on an off day, going to be the better team. It takes a freakish result, as Tim said, with Wolves. It takes a freakish result. The opposition not taking the one chance, Man City spawning 5 or 6 good chances. I just think that Man City always create, and in these final games, you want your sort of killer that you've got in the final third, and I think they've got the biggest one in the league. Even if he, has got the build up play of a League Two player, as Roy Keane said. So I don't see it as a negative, to be honest. I see it from an Arsenal point of view. It sort of makes Man City feel even more inevitable, because you're just like, well, they've got a juggernaut team, and then they brought in a juggernaut finisher who, if he gets 3 chances, will at least take 1. I don't see it as a bad thing for City, but I do think they are more gettable this season. Like, you look at some games where teams have counter-attacked them like pretty regularly in games. I know a lot of that came when Rodri wasn't playing, but even when he's been playing, teams are getting in behind them. They're managing to break through the press. So, Bournemouth pinned them back for the last half an hour of that game and just could not take their chances. So I've been saying for a while, I do think they've got a draw in them at least, but you're sort of running out of games now for it to actually happen. So I don't know. I'm looking at the fixtures, and you're thinking, could David Moyes in the last game do his mate Arteta a favour while Arteta's playing against his old side Everton? That would be good for the narrative. But don't know. You're looking at. I mean, I've been really impressed by Wolves and how they play, and they've got a really good style. But just feels like, I mean, they played well against Arsenal, but literally created hardly anything. It was good on the eye, but I just don't see Wolves having enough to really punish them. And then you're starting to think the same with Fulham as well. So even though we're saying they look a bit more fragile, it takes a lot. I think that's the only thing giving people hope is the fact that they do look human this season. But I think we're maybe forgetting just how good they still are. So I still think they've got maybe 1 draw in them, but then Arsenal need to be perfect and need to make sure that they keep their goal difference better, which is +7. But we all know that Man City can just win 5-6-0 like that. So I think that is a big bonus to Arsenal, is that they know just one draw and they should be clear in terms of goal difference. I think that is a nice psychological cushion, that if Man City do slip up, they are there to win.
I mean, just say, Adam, City are still on track. Last season they were imperious. They won the treble, held as one of the best teams of our generation. They are on track to score more points than last season if they win their remaining games. which and myself, I've said Kevin De Bruyne doesn't quite seem the player he was. He's still got 15 assists despite missing half the season. Like Haaland's, like I said earlier, still the 6th top scorer in Europe, let alone the Premier League. So yeah, it's because you know why it is. We're all desperate to see them fail. That's what it is. So we all exacerbate their flaws, right? Because we want to see the end of this.
I'm not sure if I was going to say, when you said we're desperate to see them fail, I think, well, personally, as a neutral, it makes no odds to me who wins the Premier League title in any way, shape or form. But we want to see them slip just to make it more dramatic. That's why we're looking at Haaland coming back and going, well, yeah, but he scores thousands of goals, but maybe it might be a negative to try and keep this title race.
Yeah, you're right. It's never hate. It's rarely hatred with City for your average football fan. I think it's just apathy, really, because they sort of make it so machine-like. They take the human side out of it, Adam.
Andy, let's come to you. What do you reckon's going to happen? Manchester City at home against Wolves.
I'm a bit like John. I really do like Wolves, and I like what they're all about. But comfortable 3-0 for City. Yeah. I think
only 3. Yeah. Tim.
1-1.
Come on.
No. What you asked me?
1-1.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's the draw we want in the title race. Tim doesn't really believe it.
What?
Wolves have lost. What is it? Is it 4 out of their last 7, and their only win in that time is against Luton.
Good team, Luton. Yeah.
Okay. And Jordan, your prediction for this one?
I'm going to go 3-1 City, but at some point there will be jeopardy in the game, and then City will just turn on the machine and kill it.
Yeah. I would predict the only jeopardy will be just as the referee puts the whistle to his lips ahead of kickoff. And then it will all go to plan for Manchester City. But we will see. Who knows? Maybe there will be twists. Maybe there will be turns in this title race. Let's concentrate on the basement now. So let's turn our attention to the other end of the table. Everton and Brentford are now mathematically safe. So it is a 3-way shootout between Nottingham Forest, who are 17th with 26 points, Luton 18th with 25 points, and Burnley 19th with 24 points. They're coming up on the rails. They've been timing their run perfectly. Just to mention, obviously, the caveat to all of this is that Nottingham Forest are still waiting for a verdict on their appeal to their 4-point deduction. So it may be reduced, but we're not quite sure exactly what's going to happen. But it is worth just keeping in mind. They are 1 point above the drop zone. It may well be reduced and they may well be slightly safer, but we shall see. So Luton are first up on Friday night at Kenilworth Road, and they're up against Everton, who are already safe. Obviously, Luton need to get their acts together. They need to get some points. They need to win some games if they're actually going to get their head above the relegation parapet. Do you see, and this will be key, I suppose, in it, do you see Everton being on the beach? Sean Dyche's sides don't go on the beach, do they?
Andy's probably a better place to answer in terms of what Burnley have done in the past, but I don't know. Everton do sort of rely on that traditional late April, early May intensity to get them over the safety line, which we see every single year. Are they going to have that on Friday night? That's the big question, really. Luton have obviously got to match it and beat it, but the question for Luton is, have they got the quality to win a match? It's been pretty rare that they've won games recently, and it's such a shame. It's been there for them. This is going to be the lowest ever points tally probably needed to stay up. I think the lowest points tally ever to survive is 34, which was some team that play in blue and white stripes, who we don't talk about. So with Luton, it is such a shame because it has been there for them. Just a couple of wins right in the last 10, and they would basically be very close to safety. But on the other hand, I think you'd say they're punching above their weight, even in 18th, to be honest. If Rob Edwards somehow keeps them up it would be up there with what, like Bradford is one of the most unlikely survival stories ever in the top flight, probably not just the Premier League. If you look at how much they spent, 19 million last summer, Burnley spent almost 100 million, and they were champions. The budget they've got, the players they've got, the story coming up from non-league, it would be ridiculous if they stayed it, but they just don't have the quality, Adam, and we've seen that time and again all season. So how they can pluck sort of 4 to 6 points from the last 3 games, it's a real tough ask. But yeah, they will hope that Everton's intensity levels really drop.
And they really struggled with injuries as well. Obviously, they lost their captain during the season, Tom Lockyer, as well, in those really, really unfortunate circumstances. So that's had an impact as well. Jordan, let's talk about Nottingham Forest, because they are, they are just a very interesting football club with the whole Marinakis element to it. And they've got quite a cosy fixture against Sheffield United. You sort of get the feeling that it may well be done and dusted this weekend. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think if they don't get it done this weekend, they don't beat Sheffield United, I think they're in serious trouble then, because you've got Chelsea and you're thinking they're unlikely to take something off that, and then you've got Burnley in the last game of the season where they've come from nowhere really. I remember sitting with Andy at Turf Moor when Arsenal were putting 4 or 5 past them, and it was really, really a depressed place at the time. So I did not see them managing to get together this run of results just to even be in contention. But I mean, Forest just they just look like they're on a sort of irreparable decline. I mean, they brought in Nuno, and he's not really got the sort of kick or the bounce, however you want to call it. I mean, the whole cloud hanging over them with the points deduction. I do find it farcical that we've got 3 games to go in the season, and we still don't know what Forest's actual points total really is in reality. It's unfair for them. It's unfair for the teams below them as well, trying to work out, where are we? How is their emotional state? And I think that is probably going to impact them to a certain degree. So, yeah, I think Forest have got to get this over the line at the weekend. I think 1 win probably should be enough for them. They would back themselves to then pick up something against Burnley. But I think if they get a win, they almost take themselves to safety in reality. But you just look at Forest and think Sheffield United have actually, it's been the last 10, 15 minutes of games that they've collapsed a lot. They've been in the lead or they've been drawn up until 70, 80 minutes. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's a similar story. And Forest are the last 10 minutes desperately trying to get a goal, but that's something they're struggling with. So I'm not sure they're even going to be able to sweep aside a team like Sheffield United, who are going to probably have conceded a century of goals this season, which is quite an impressive feat to be taking on a team that bad, and you're still not confident that they'll get the result. But it's not even at home either, and I think everybody backs Forest when they're at home and they've got that sort of intensity to them. But away from home, I think you're struggling to see them anything looking comfortable. So yeah, I think it is a big game for them.
Yeah, if you haven't been keeping track of Sheffield United, and why would you? They have conceded 97 goals this season in the Premier League, approaching that century. It is the record not to have, isn't it, in the Premier League? Let's deal with Burnley then. And I mentioned that the form table before with Bournemouth. Burnley are actually 10th in the form table over their last 5 games. It is all relative. They've only picked up 6 points during that time, but in the grand scheme of things, that is good form considering the rest of the season. They've only lost 1 of their last 8. What's your feeling on this, Andy? You cover Burnley closely and have done sort of with the ups and the downs. They got a draw against Manchester United last weekend. I think someone predicted on this podcast that they could picture Vincent Kompany celebrating on the touchline at Old Trafford. I can't remember who that was. But this is a big test against Newcastle. And as I mentioned with Jordan, the results could basically effectively end the tussle this weekend. but we all secretly want it to go down to that last game against Nottingham Forest, so you have a relegation shootout. What's your feeling at the moment? Are Burnley going to keep this one alive?
I think they put themselves in a position to, and I didn't see that coming. As Jordan mentioned, that Arsenal game, that was the pits, if you like. That was the sort of the end of the world type day that everyone just thought, right, just let's call the season now and plan for the championship. But they've responded really well. There was a couple more poor results after that, but then, as you mentioned, that run that they've been on, and barring mistakes that they've made themselves, it could look even better for them. You've got Muric, who's come in for James Trafford in goal, and has largely been excellent. His shot stopping's been brilliant. He's made a real difference. But equally, he booted against Calvert-Lewin's leg in a 1-0 defeat to Everton and miscontrolled the ball, and it went into the net in the draw against Brighton. So there's 3 points there, which could, by the end of the season, make a massive difference. But I think they're almost the form side of the three, and they've got the momentum. Now the momentum can go at any point, and it's Newcastle at home, which was the game which relegated them 2 years ago as well. So there's those memories that they've got to banish as well. But I think I looked at the run they've got now. So Man United, Newcastle, and Tottenham, 3 difficult games. I know Tottenham's form is terrible, but from a Burnley perspective, going to Tottenham, it's going to be difficult. I thought they needed 4 points because the effectively need to be within 2 of Forest come that final day, and you're basically legislating the Forest are going to beat Sheffield United, and then you've just got to pray that Chelsea do the business against them. Interestingly, Company is whether it's mind games, but he keeps saying if Luton win all their games, then they'll stay up, which basically means that he thinks they'll beat Forest on the final day. So they're going to either relegate Forest and themselves, or because of what Luton do, or they're going to be the ones that stay up because they're going to be Forest on the final day. So it's a little bit of an interesting little mind game that he's playing at the minute. He's mentioned that a few times. But they're in a good place, and that they've got a lot of the team who are in form, which for the large portion of the season, most of the players either just weren't good enough or weren't in form. So they've found a formula. It's probably going to come too late, but they found the formula of how to not only compete in games, but compete for results and get results. And they're responding to setbacks. Like the gift Man U the goal last weekend. It's a through ball from Sanderberg effectively, and for the position they were in, it would have been easy for them to drop their heads and go, well, that's us done. But they come back, get a bit of fortune, and Onana likes to punch people in the head in his own box. But they get the penalty and score it and get the point. So, there is that momentum there, and while it is Newcastle and while Isak's looking, incredible in front of goal, and Newcastle away form isn't great. So there's that chance, and Company's just talked about belief all the way through the season, but they've got that chance, which they shouldn't have, quite frankly. And they wouldn't if Forest hadn't cheated and got the points deduction. But that's the chance, and they've just got to try and put as many points on the board as possible and see where they are.
So Liverpool against Tottenham, if Liverpool hadn't stumbled in recent weeks, looked as if it was going to be a huge game in the title race. But now it's more important for Spurs. But as we saw at Stamford Bridge, they've continued to wobble in their pursuit of the top 4. That was one of their games in hand on Aston Villa, and they blew it at Stamford Bridge. Tim, it was interesting. You were right to point out that Tottenham would become the first team in Premier League history to win 8 out of their first 10 games and then finish outside the top 4.
In a 38-game season, yeah.
In a 38-game season. Thank you for that clarification. It is looking like a real uphill task now. They're 7 points behind Aston Villa. And how should we view this end of season capitulation in terms of what Ange Postecoglou has done at the club this season overall?
It's pretty worrying in terms of, they look tired to me, which is bizarre because they've not had any other competitions since January. I know it's been a long season for them in terms of, he asks a lot of them and it's very sort of high octane football, and that's led to a lot of injuries. So maybe that's part of it. But it looked to me, watching the Chelsea game on Thursday night, that the players just weren't doing what he asked. And it was interesting that Postecoglou was saying pre-match that he thinks the players don't believe in his methods yet. He was kind of saying, I have to ask myself, are they just doing things because I'm asking them to? Or do they actually sort of believe in this? I remember the other Chelsea game earlier in the season when, they went down to 9 men and they were still defending on the halfway line. And it kind of felt like, they definitely do sort of believe in what he's saying. But when the results don't follow, it must be difficult for the players to sort of continue with that trust. I think he was sort of asked, he said, it looks like my messages aren't getting through. So the reporter asked him, what are those messages? He goes, well, I'm not going to tell you. He's like, I'm not going to write you a dossier, work it out yourself, mate, as he keeps kind of saying at the moment. No, when journalists ask him questions, well, you work it out. So I don't know. I feel like he gets away with stuff because he's a bit like Klopp. He can be funny and he says it how it is, but really he's just comes across as pretty disrespectful, I think, at times. Somebody think of the journalists, hey? But yeah, it's an interesting one for Spurs because he's done this before in his career. To be fair, he started slowly in Australia, he started slowly in Japan, where they finished mid-table. He started slowly in the initial weeks at Celtic, and then obviously they ran away with the title. But there were lots of things for him to work on after a slow start at pretty much every club he's been at. But the Premier League is a completely different animal, and it's an interesting one for Levy now in the summer. Does Levy, who was kind of using Postecoglou at the start of the season as like a human shield and saying, look, I've hired this guy, so I'm amazing. It's pretty cringe, really. And now does he kind of back him in the transfer market and say, yeah, I trust in your methods? Because it's a real switch from being top of the table from 10 games to their form since then is outside of Europe, basically. So there's a lot that's gone wrong there.
Jordan, I wanted to get your take on this because obviously you're Scottish and you've covered Scottish football in depth, and you've seen Ange Postecoglou when things have been going really, really well for Celtic, but also there will have been moments when it was getting tense for him in a similar situation to this at Tottenham when he was under the pump, as he would say. Is this something that he just does and we need to get used to it, or have you seen an extra layer to his sort of passive-aggressive tetchiness at Spurs?
I think it's followed a similar pattern really to what happened at Celtic, in his initial weeks when he was talking about his story, his family emigrating, and talking about, his real sort of culture that he's building, and everybody can get behind that and think, oh, this guy's really personable, what a down-to-earth guy. He just talks like he's down the pub with his mates and it's really refreshing. He's open and honest with everyone. But then I think within probably a month, like Celtic lost to Hearts early on. There was big questions, people were wanting him out already. There was a lot of stuff about, he's come for Japan, he's not ready for Scottish football. That obviously turned out to be complete nonsense. But he sort of had to face, he's been accepted in a similar way where he's had really warm coverage, I think, and people have really taken to him. But then the difference is that instead of playing Ross County 4 times a season and playing St Mirren 4 times a season, with a budget differential of about 60 million, you're playing in the Premier League where it's relentless and you're not going to go on 20, 30, 40, 50 game unbeaten streaks. And I think you're seeing that, as personable as he can be, he can also be quite confrontational, and he does it in a way that, can sort of put down the journalist in front of people, whether it's to try and assert his power or, not the first manager to do that, assert his dominance, try and, give himself that aura, which I think he has got a bit of an aura. But yeah, I think in the last few weeks, I know what he's trying to do probably, but it can be misconstrued and look a little bit fragile. So I think he's got to be careful of that because, he does engage and he gives really interesting answers. Tim was talking about it, about the dilemma of do the players 100% buy into them? Is he at the Guardiola level where the City players know if we do this, we're going to win? I don't think he is there yet, but you look at his pattern across his career, and I think that does come. And let's not forget, he's still to really put his stamp across that whole Spurs team. So I think he's a manager who demands 100% buy-in, And I think if he doesn't get it in the summer and doesn't get the exact players that he wants, because he had almost complete control at Celtic, I think he won't be happy. So I think they've got to really back him to keep him 100% happy, because if everything isn't how Ange likes it, I think that he can be a difficult. He might be a difficult character to keep under control, especially when he's used to winning. Every club he's been at, he wants to win, and that'll be the case at Spurs. He'll want to try and break that glass ceiling, but reality set in the last couple of months that they are quite some way off still for being a consistent team. But I think he's done a good job in his first season. Again, he tried to mock the question of would you have taken fifth place at the start of the season after losing Harry Kane? But I think probably everyone would have said that was a decent return for Spurs. It's just that if they hadn't finished the season as poorly as they have so far, you wouldn't be sitting here thinking, oh, has he lost the momentum? Has the message maybe getting diluted, or the players losing faith? I think it's just they've had a bad run of 3 games against top teams. If they can get a couple of results towards the end of the season and finish on a high, then I think it changes the perception. Yeah, but it does feel like it's the first time he's sort of hit the rocks and not been within touching distance of the league. So it is a new experience for him, really. But yeah, I think he should probably try and cut down on the mates and the passive aggressiveness.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how he continues on. Obviously, a lot of focus on the final few games of the Jurgen Klopp era, Andy. And just a quick word on Liverpool. Obviously, you've got the Mo Salah disgruntlement rolled into the picture as well. Klopp isn't going to want to go out on a whimper in these final few games, is he? And hopefully, I suppose, I don't know, it depends how you view Liverpool. If you really dislike them, whatever, it would be nice to see that relationship sort of come up smelling of roses in these final few games, rather than it end on a real sour note and that dominate the storylines.
Yeah, it's been a real sort of grim few weeks generally in terms of Liverpool's hopes of winning anything other than the League Cup sort of going up in smoke, and that sort of the row between Klopp and Salah, or whatever you want to call it. You would like to think that is sort of the bottom of it. Like you've hit your worst point, and from this, everyone just sort of goes, right, well, should we just enjoy it now? I think as and crying internally while saying this, and you'd much rather Liverpool be in the title race, but not being in it might just release them shackles, and it might just bring about that sort of freer mentality, a bit of freedom. There's not pressure on every single pass necessarily that you play, because the Liverpool players are going to want to finish in the right way. That Klopp's going to want to win his final 2 games at Anfield. It's still weird to think that there's only 2 games left of Klopp being on the touchline in the home dugout for Liverpool, and whether you think it's cringe or not, the fish pumps and stuff at the end, I'm sure he'll want at least one more of them, sort of to send everyone home happy. And yeah, you're right. You don't want the last few weeks and sort of all the frustrations and the anger and the question marks about certain players, just continuing, because I think that the other thing is you don't want to end the season on a note where it puts you in a bit of a pessimistic, negative mindset heading into the new season. Because Slot's gonna come in when that gets announced eventually, and you want to be building, you want a little bit of momentum there. So I think Klopp will feel that's his responsibility to put Liverpool back on track for the final 3 games, and sort of end as the best way as possible. And as I say, it might help that the fact that they're not in the title race, there's that pressure of, you've got to win. You've got to win these games because of otherwise because of the consequences. That's gone now. So it might just free them up a little bit, and you hope that it ends on a good note, and Mo Salah's back scoring, and everything looks a lot rosier than it does at the minute.
But you never know, do you? You never know. If Arsenal lose against Bournemouth, Manchester City, as we expect, get beaten again by Wolves, and then Liverpool win, well, it'll be right back on again.
Having experienced Manchester City in title races, my the likelihood of that for me is less than 0%.
That's all we've got time for. Andy, thank you very much for being on the show once again.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
And Tim, to you, have a good weekend. Are you footballing this weekend?
Yeah, football all the way for me, mate. Yeah, defo.
Football all the way. Yeah, brilliant. And Jordan, you're going to be watching Arsenal, I presume?
Watching Arsenal on Saturday, and then like Tim, maybe tuning into snooker as well. So yeah,
lovely. Yeah, just to calm yourselves for the final run in. Okay, that's it for today's show. IO is going to be back on Monday. I hope you have a great weekend, and thanks once again for listening.
If you want to watch more episodes of the show, please subscribe to the channel. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season. If you'd like to listen to the episodes in full in audio form, search The Athletic FC wherever you get your podcasts from.